Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, the first regular video like this, doing since the tour in Los Angeles, going out there and taking part in some of the activities there, watching the game, meeting with some people. I wanted to get together and put together a bit of a summary of some of the information that I mentioned in the video the night after the game, as well as on the podcast yesterday, and really kind of get into things in general. There is a lot to discuss on United and moving forward. A lot of good things and a lot of things still to come. So let's get right into it. I don't have an intro for this one. A couple of major things that I want to speak about is that one of the and bear in mind everything I'm going to tell you in this video. I mean, everything I tell you in general is well sourced and good information, and I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it. But everything I'm going to share with you here, you can take as essentially it is real. It is the reality of where United are at from their perspective, where things are going, and I think it's important to just grasp that it's not BS. It's the truth. It's where things are coming from. And one of the things that was stressed really heavily to me by my sources at the club is that United are very much in this sell to buy situation. Now, I was talking about that in the week leading up to the tour. I have had those conversations before, and that was the run that I got, and I've been pushing that since the Euro deal, that United were now sell to buy. It is the case. United need to raise funds. They're very excited about the signings that they've made in Joshua Zirkzee and Lenny Yoro. They think they're great signings. They think they've made huge improvements by bringing those players in, but they really, really do want to keep it going. They don't want to stop there. They're not saying 2 is enough. They want to make a minimum 2 more signings, potentially more, but the finances need to be right. And it's kind of a hard thing to discuss because there's a lot out there where people will insist that they can spend a lot more money than they can. And I'm telling you right now, that's not the case. PSR, these kind of calculations are a lot more complicated than people think. They were happy with their ability to get under the limit without selling and that they are safe. But the issue is if they spent, 200 million net this summer, you end up in a situation where if something goes wrong next year, if you don't make Champions League, you could be in a serious situation, and that's what they don't want to be in, where they're unable to buy anything. They're unable to do anything. They're unable to resolve problems that may arise. And so they really do need to sell to buy. And that's kind of where things are at. And that's one of the major reasons things have slowed down. It's not so much that they're on the tour. Yes, that's going to distract from things because players like Wan-Bissaka, we'll talk about in a second, players like Mctominay, players like Lindelof, they're out there. You need them, essentially. You kind of need them. And obviously you have the staff, Wilcox, Ashworth, all of them, Omar Barado, working on things. And of course, they can't devote all their time to transfers, but they're not usually anyway. But it's the same for other clubs. They're on tours, they're on pre-seasons, they're working on other deals, and there's a lot of kind of things that need to happen in order for things to move forward. So it is sell to buy, and just bear that in mind, that everything is in line with needing outs to get ins, and that's going to be kind of the theme for a lot of the transfers, and depends on what we can do. So the first one, that's the closest one to this, the most imminent, the most likely, it was indicated to me on Saturday in discussions with sources of mine that Wan-Bissaka was definitely one of the main ones in terms of that consideration for, if we sell him, we can buy, and was sort of lining up. And the indication there was that it was close, and that it was the closest one to happening. As it remains as of today, West Ham are very interested. The fee between West Ham and United would not be that far apart. With Mazraoui being available, United would be willing to sell Wan-Bissaka for less than 20 million they initially indicated, because they feel that they could get a deal for Mazraoui closer to the 15 million mark. That extra amount of money, the slightly lower fee, would help West Ham in making a deal for Wan-Bissaka. The issue with Wan-Bissaka and joining West Ham in the first place came down mostly to wages. He doesn't want to accept, either way, right or wrong, he's entitled to ask for what he's going to ask for based on where he's currently at and what he thinks he's worth, all of that, and what offers might be there from other clubs. I think Turkey actually paid pretty good wages, and there was some interest in him from there. And so West Ham would have to put together a competitive package. This is not done. This is not agreed. There are a few things that need to be agreed. Bayern need to agree to sell Mazraoui at a good price to United. The personal terms with Mazraoui won't be an issue, but they need to agree to sell him at about that price that they accepted from West Ham. They can't add suddenly a tax onto it. West Ham ideally need to agree with Wan-Bissaka, and that would push everything kind of forward. But I do think that's going to stretch into next week because he's the only senior fullback at United right now. And it's the type of thing where it's like, yeah, it's moving, it's kind of happening, but he's probably not going to leave the tour. There's only 4 more days left, 2 games they need him for. He's not going to leave the tour, and not likely anyway. There's no other fullbacks joining, so they need him. They need him to be there. They need him to stay. They need to have a good preseason, and I think next week then this will get moving. But the first thing is they need to make that agreement between West Ham and Wan-Bissaka himself, and there's been active discussions. He is more open to it. There has been a willingness indicated, and that is pressing this deal kind of forward. But at the same time, he's going to have to. They're going to have to agree, and that has not happened yet. So this is one I expect will move into next week, but very much the most likely, the closest transfer right now, Wan-Bissaka out, Mazraoui in. And I think, that could affect the situation of the left back and right back in terms of him being the replacement that could cover both sides and would allow United to maintain a little more flexibility. It's going to be hard for them to buy a left back in addition to Mazraoui, simply because of the funds. Like I said, sell to buy, very much sell to buy, and there's not much to sell on that left side, especially if you needed that center back. And so I think that Mazraoui's looking like he could be the coverage for both sides. See how Malacia gets on, and then you could always reinforce in January if needed, but. They should be pretty good with Shaw, Dalot, and Mazraoui at least to start the year. It's not like you couldn't have a center back covered in the pinch, but three there is pretty good, with Mazraoui being viewed as more competent to be able to cover on both sides there too. At center back, a couple things with regards to this. Prior to Leny Yoro's injury, as I indicated pretty strongly, I did not think the Ligt would happen, simply because they were sort of viewed as the alternatives. He was viewed as kind of the alternative, Yoro the higher priority, same position. And as soon as they got Yoro, if they hadn't had Yoro, De Ligt would already be a Manchester United player, most likely. The focus had been on a left-sided center back to back up Lisandro Martinez, someone left-footed, ideally. There's been a lot of names discussed. We've gone over them in the past, and there hasn't really been anything new on this. Lindelof still needs to be sold. Now, the moment Leny Yoro's injury occurred, Lindelof returned to training. That is not particularly accidental, as I gather it. It's suddenly, hey, we actually might need Victor Lindelof. This is still kind of up in the air, this center back situation. Being completely honest, I cannot say I know where this is going to land now based on the Yoro injury, because I don't know yet the timeline. I have a pretty good idea of the injury that has occurred, but I don't. Without a timeline and without the further assessments that will occur, I don't want to say anything specific on this, because inevitably people will run away with it. They'll think it's, inevitably I think people will take it worse than what I say, unfortunately. So I don't want to get into it. It'd be better to just keep it simple at the moment, and say that there's further assessments to be made. And depending on the outcome of those, it probably will tell United what decision they want to make. I suggest that there's a possibility they could stand on it if it's not that serious, and maybe they don't make a signing here unless a very good offer comes into Lindelof. De Ligt being the name that they're still maintaining contact on, but what's very, very key is that they're not going to sign Matthijs de Ligt unless they get a good price for him. They're not going to go pay 50 million plus add-ons just because of this. Again, barring Lenny Euro's injury, and I'm not making this suggestion. If somehow it turned out he was out for a year, then they probably would, but that's not the case. And I don't think that that's what's going to happen. So it kind of almost remains as it were, though it is unpredictable. I don't know how this injury affects things as of yet. It means they need Lindelof right now because they need center backs on the tour as well. And it may mean they need center backs at the start of the season. Obviously, if they could sell him and buy someone, then you have that replacement. But you have to sell him. You'd have to get that Mazraoui and Wan-Bissaka deal done well if it's going to happen so that you're not losing money there. And then I think they could fund it. But it's not going to give you that much money. Lindelof isn't going to fetch a lot of money. You make a little profit on the Wan-Bissaka sale with the Mazraoui thing, and that probably gives you the money for a 35-40 million purchase, which is the price they would need Bayern to get to on De Ligt for that to happen. And so again, all under this kind of underlying theme of sell to buy, the math has to work. I think they do have other options that they would like at left center back that have been mentioned and discussed by others. That could definitely still happen. And maybe they will still just go for that. I don't know. Because the Euro thing isn't totally decided, I don't know how it affects things. If it's very short, then it's not going to change the initial indication about why I said before that I don't think Matthijs de Ligt is that likely. If it's medium to long, then it might. And it will also depend on the price again. It really will have to depend on that price. So this is a little bit up in the air, and when we have more information on his injury, we'll know. Again, I have a pretty good idea, and I'm a little bit hopeful that it's not going to be as bad as we think, but we will see. In terms of time, but we will see. We'll just have to see. Sorry about that. In terms of the midfield, the biggest thing here that I want to indicate is Scott McTominay, because there was reports on McTominay. Ten Hag wants to keep him. Ten Hag wants to keep him stay. He mentioned this. That Scott McTominay would be saying. I don't think that that's at all nailed on in the slightest. From conversations that I had with the sources that I have, it was pretty clear to me. If a good offer comes in, while Ten Hag likes McTominay and would keep him, he's not going to turn it down, a deal for him. If there's a good deal on the table, they're not going to turn it down. If Scott McTominay wants to go and there's a good deal, they will sell him. They will sell him if there's a good deal. There's a plan. There are very much, if we can sell, we can do this. Everybody is in agreement on that plan. And it's not a situation, and Ten Hag is in total agreement with how's it put? Basically, understanding that he'd be willing to let McTominay go as a means to continue to pursue the plan that they have and sign the players that they're looking to sign. So, yeah, that's what I can say on that with McTominay. He's not going to be blocked from being sold if a good offer comes in. It's not an issue. If an offer comes in, McTominay will go, and that would allow definitely United to spend in the midfield. Again, sell to buy. And it is expected that Fulham will return with a better offer. They're kind of still waiting for that. But again, I will say some of it has to do with the tour, that it slows things down a little bit, and that next week it might be more happening on this, and I certainly would expect so. And United would probably push it a bit more next week if it's going to occur. Especially when there'll be more players returning, and in Bruno Fernandes, all of that. There's going to be less time, less minutes, less. It'll be made very clear with McTominay. His role is pretty much a bit part player, and he's going to continue to try to get those options. So it's up to him too. If he wants to go and they can get those offers coming in, then he will go, and they'll get those offers. And so, but it's not going to be blocked. I think that's the key important kind of clarification point, because there's been kind of back and forth reports on this. It's not going to be stopped. McTominay will be sold if a good offer comes in. On Casemiro, very much a different tone than I had earlier in speaking, which is that it's kind of like, the basic view of it right now is, why can't he have a better season? Why can't we get the most out of him? Why can't he have a bounce back year? Why can't, sometimes it's looked at like, the player's finished, that they're done, that they can't do anything. But maybe that has a lot more to do with the environment, with the setup, with things like that, and why can't he have a bounce back year. Now, I'm not 100% buying that myself, because I think that the issue is there's certain aspects to Casemiro physically that where he can't cover the spaces and things like he used to, that were his greatest strengths. However, at the same time, I can absolutely see, like, in the game against Arsenal, was better. And when he's played in a 2, it's been better. And I think we have to do that anyway. If we have another midfielder coming in who can cover, who can start, and he's more rotation substitute, then I think it might really extend the longevity if we're playing a different system where he's got a more energetic, partner, where Kabi is closer to him. Things like that might help. I still have a lot of concerns, but essentially, yeah, United would still absolutely take a big offer for Casemiro, but at this point, they're not really expecting it. That's basically the message that I got. Basically, the what I was gathering from things is that United aren't really expecting a big offer to come in for him at this point. And there's been a definite change in tack from Saudi. I've talked about that before in terms of the profile, who they're looking for, the ages, all of that. And it seems less and less likely by the day that they come in for Casemiro. It's hard for me to predict, but United are not really expecting him to go at this point, and so the focus has been on how can we get the most out of Casemiro, and it's a bit of a change in the narrative over his situation, but that's part of football, and that's part of the the view of these people involved is, okay, if we can't sell him, what can we do then? What can we do to get the most out of Casemiro? What can be done to make this work? And that's their focus as of now. And to be fair, I give them a little bit of trust. They're pretty optimistic that he could have a good season. They're pretty optimistic, and I kind of have to trust them a little bit at this point. I can't say that I'm totally in agreement. I'm not saying I'm gonna like 100% buy it, but the club are a little optimistic about having a bounce back year. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to sit there as a starting 6 in a holding role by himself and do well. But I think part of that is countenance with ideally getting somebody else in as well. The other factor here is Toby Collyer. He's played a lot in the preseason. They've been getting a really good look at him, but it's not a situation where with Collyer, because I wanted to know, and I asked in conversations about this, what's the deal here? Because a lot of people I've spoken with, in the academy, I'm not trying to denigrate, insult him, but he's 20 years old, and they haven't seen the spark, the something that you got from obviously like the players who have broken. Kobbie Mainoo. I mean, Ahmad, when he signed, was insane at the youth level in the few games that he played there, and it was obvious he's too good for it. Hannibal Mejbri was a lot better at the youth level than Toby Collyer, and so there's a little bit of a wonder, like, what the deal is, and it's kind of just that he's 20 years old. Physically, he's up to the men's game. And it's not so much that they're saying, yeah, he's the 6 coverage. He's the guy. We're convinced he's got it. It's they need to see what he can offer. They need to see what he can do because of where he's at age-wise and physical profile. They think he's physically at an age where, and a profile where he could play at the senior level, but is he ready? And essentially that's what they want to see with these preseason games. And so it's not a matter of they're sitting there convinced saying, yeah, Collyer is going to be the next star. He's going to be a starting 6. It's not like that. Okay. It is a matter of they want to see what he can do. And then based on that, make those kind of assessments. The other thing I forgot to mention at center back, I mentioned this before too, but very, very likely that Harry Maguire stays. That's not really, shouldn't be a surprise at this point in time, but it is the reality. Harry Maguire is very, very likely to stay. It was definitely, it was definitely more the Lindelof sale that needs to go there. But Maguire is admired by a lot of people at the club. There's a much different view of Maguire within than without. And I've said that many times before. People take issue with it, but I trust the people who are there making these calls right now, and they don't see Maguire in the same way that a lot of people do. I think he could be a very important, player for United for sure. So yes, so in terms of the midfield, then Ugarte remains a top choice. And if they could get him on a loan plus a conditional obligation, I've said this before, then I think that makes the deal a lot more viable. Fabrizio mentioned that they might be willing to do that. I don't know if they'd be willing on conditional obligation, but that's going to have to be part of the negotiation process. Once they get João Neves, they're expected to have more talks between PSG and United over Ugarte and get some more flexibility. If they can sell Scott and they can make a deal for 40 million, then they'll do it. If they could get a loan plus obligation, they might do it anyway. But Scott McTominay would certainly help, depending on the conditions, the price of that obligation, of course. If not, there are other options. Zubimendi, a player that's looked at, but I think is a bit difficult to do. Fofana, there's been basic contacts, but again, a backup option. And then the fallback, if there's no money and they're going back to things, might be a very, very affordable deal for Amrabat. Potentially not even a permanent deal, but a deal where they just do a loan and he goes to an expiring contract, because you give Fiorentina, 5 million in wages covered. It gets him off the books, but United don't have to sign him to a long-term deal, and he's a free agent at the end of it. That is a potential, because they're not convinced about him for the long term. I've said that many times. I said that last year. I've said it all through this year, and I maintain that. They're not convinced of him as a long-term option. So there would have to be a pretty flexible deal here. But it is a fallback. It is a fallback option. Ugarte continues to be kind of the main one being pursued there. And once this João Neves thing finally wraps up, and probably next week or later this week, then there will be more talks to move things forward on that side of it. But, with everything, there's like one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, because there's all this sell to buy. The conditions of how to get a deal done for Ugarte would change, of course, based on PSG's ask, but also based on McTominay. They can't pay 50 million without a sale. So that's going to be a factor in that too. A couple other changes that I think are important, with Eric, it's like there's good and there's bad for him. And I wouldn't say bad, because I think it's good overall, and I think it actually gives him the best chance to succeed. Anybody who's in these areas has an ego, and they think they know best, and they're very confident and sure of themselves, and that's all good, except when you're not. When you're not the best at those things, and there's things you miss. And it's always helpful having support of people who are experts. Ten Hag definitely has a boss like he's never had before at United. In the 2 years leading up to this, he never had a boss in the way that it is now. There are people around. It's not just an accident that Ashworth, Wilcox, and them are all there. They're seeing things, they're looking at things, and they're stepping in. There's a lot of oversight. There's a lot of direction. There's a lot of, this is what needs to happen here. This is what happens here. This is where we see there could be improvement. Van Nistelrooy, that's why they wanted these coaches who are experts. Van Nistelrooy is doing a big, big job. And a lot of that's at the direction, not just of Ten Hag, but of these individuals above, stepping in. So Ten Hag definitely appreciates the support. And I think that it very much aligns everybody. And I think it's going to give everyone the best chance of succeeding. But it's all definitely within the confines, of what they want and how they see things and how they are approaching things. And I think that's how it should be. That's the modern day. And I think, frankly, that it gives Ten Hag the best chance of succeeding, because they can identify the weaknesses that he has, and he does have some weaknesses, and fix it. And we've seen some of them tactically in abandoning this suicidal, open midfield with 1-6 and moving it back more into a pivot, actually pushing the lineup. It was not really true so much that players couldn't play the high line. I'm sorry, it wasn't that they wouldn't do it or they were refusing. It wasn't. We've seen it in preseason. They're doing it. They're playing so high. When you see it in person, wherever the ball is, they are so high. So there's a lot of things that have changed already, tactically, all of that. And Sancho's one of those things as well. Sancho, things are not, between him and Eric, aren't like all great. They're not all hugs and kisses and smiles and you're my favorite player, you're my favorite coach, or anything even close to that, but it doesn't have to be. It was very much from above stepping in and saying this situation can't go on like this. You guys have to be adults and put it behind you, and let's move on. Forget the past. That's what they wanted, and that's what they did, to both of their credits, to say, regardless of everything that happened in the past, and a lot of it wasn't on them. There's so much that happened in the Sancho situation that has a lot to do with the club itself, mismanaging things for a long time. There's so much of that went on. And so the club is saying, good, we're fixing that. So I need you guys to put this behind you. And they have. And so with him, the situation is fine. If he stays, it's fine. And he can be a good player for United and they get the most out of him. And they feel that they can do that. They feel they know him well enough, and they've got the coaches and the people that understand his skill set well enough to get the most out of him. I think he's been better this preseason. Effort levels have been good. I think he's been pretty effective in some moments, and I think that his work would be to secure the backup to Rashford position with Ahmad and Garnacho as the main choices on the right. I think that would be his goal and what he should be aiming for. If an offer came in and he wanted to take it, they would sell him. But the situation means that no one can come and say, yeah, well, you're not using him, we're not going to pay any money. Someone has to pay, because United would be happy to keep him and have him be a player who contributes to the team's success this year. And so I think it's worked out really well. And this is the benefit of having, support and people around you that can help in the situation. So only a positive to me. Only a positive to me, all of that. It's different. Ten Hag he's under pressure. He has to perform. He is. Because it's a high performance environment and the expectations are high. And there's oversight. But it's done in a manner that's transparent and also predictable and understandable. The same goes for players. I talked about this last year. One of the things that I felt where United were really, really bad in managing things is that you have to have predictable and understandable parameters for what constitutes success and failure. And they weren't there for the players. They're there. They weren't there for the coach. They're there. The coach would be, when things get bad, the Glazers will sack him. But what's the actual measurement? What's the measurement of success? How are we actually doing this? Is it just like, oh, we're losing games and we sack them? What? And it doesn't do anything because there was no real setup. So yes, Ten Hag has pressure to perform. He does. He absolutely does. And they need to do well this year. But it's going to be understandable and definable parameters communicated to him about this is what constitutes success. This is what we're measuring based on, and regular discussion over whether it's being met or not, so that it is a look at and saying, yes, you're achieving what we set out to be given the tools that we have. Or no, you're not. And that's okay. And that's how it should be. So I think there's a lot of good things there. And the biggest thing that I would say, and I cannot stress this enough, is that there's so much more positivity. And I don't just mean like, positive, everybody's positive and feeling great. But it's like an alignment of everything where there's not this confusion or like people are positive, but it's like, what are we doing? We're just, what's actually happening? It's hard to quantify it and put it tangibly, but there's a difference in a really directed, aligned, we're training this way, we're doing things this way, we're approaching things this way, these are the measurements, this is what we're doing, this is how we're going, this is where you succeed, than just kind of a bit of a free-for-all and something that could change it at the drop of the hat. There's a short-term plan, there's a long-term plan, and a lot of the positivity comes because everyone can see the exact steps towards that long-term goal. And it's not just, well, we'll hope we play well and we'll end up winning the league again someday and we'll keep signing players, but a real step-by-step plan to get there. Things that feel achievable, that are doable, that make sense, that are all in alignment to it. Huge difference with the way that the club are operating. Huge difference with the way that, the players feel and the staff too. I don't know how to say it without like revealing things I don't want to say, but it's just different. It's just different. And it feels like United are a club, again, that are not like at odds with us, with the fans, with the people who want to talk about them. It feels like they're listening and talking back. And so it's not bullshit. They're listening and talking back and really taking it into account, but doing the right things. So I don't know what to say, but I think that I think that will have a bigger effect than people think, because I think we've been a lot further away. It's never been about sign 2 more players and then we're there, much as we fool ourselves into thinking, because there's so much wrong under the curtain and, under the hood, behind the curtain, that is being fixed now. And all of those things could mean, quite literally, if we didn't make any more signings, I guarantee you we'd still have a good season, a decent season next year, a lot better than last year. Not that we don't need more players, we do. My point is like, there is a foundation to build these players and these transfers and all of this on with the club that wasn't there before. And otherwise it was all shifting on sand, and you could try to go really fast and build it up, but it always comes crashing down. I don't think it'll come crashing down. Even if it didn't work with Ten Hag, the foundation would still be there, and there would still be bricks laid, and there would still be a core to build on, and you'd then just be looking at, good, how do we make the next extra step? And that's where United want to be, that it's all about each year, what can we do to make the extra step? And that's a hard part. That's a really hard part, but the foundations are there, and they're 90% there every year moving forward. And I think that's where we will be soon. And so, yeah, a lot of, I'm very, very positive. I really am. I'm very happy. And I hope that, I'm really hopeful, and I hope we get some decent news on the injuries. I don't think Højlund's will be bad, but obviously we have Xerxes, and I want to say that from the understanding I have, it's really not United's fault. Like, this isn't. There were reasons players were getting injured last year. There just were, and you can say it's wrong. It's not things with training, things with this and that. You can say that I'm just blaming Ten Hag. I'm not. I explained in depth some of what was going on, but there's a whole lot that goes into it. You can just get unlucky sometimes. Over the course of the season, I'm very confident we will see fewer injuries, and we'll see players returning quicker when they are injured. It's just unlucky. This is just pure dumb bad luck, and it really has very little to do with United. The things that they're doing are making changes and making improvements. Okay, that's what I have for today. So thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. Tomorrow, I will be doing a watch along on that Tifo platform. I will put a link down below for how to sign up for that, for the Wednesday night game. It's a really cool platform, and it's building and growing a lot. I've said before, they're adding some incredible features for watch alongs, with scores, with stats, with all sorts of stuff to make it like a real broadcast that is really quite cool. Even like a lineup and a tactics board, and a lot of fun. And initially it has a few features, but I really encourage people to join. It's still in its alpha, but it's going to be launching with all of these features at the start of the season. So we're kind of getting in early, and building it up. Really cool platform. Definitely come and hang out. It's going to be like a late game, 8 o'clock my time, Wednesday night. So for some of you, that's, if you're in the UK, it's the middle of the night. I don't know if you're going to be watching during the middle of the week, but for everybody else, or if you do want to wake up, or if you're in the other part of the world where you're waking up at that time, then come hang out. Come hang out for sure. And I'll see you there. And then I've got I'll do a pre-match kind of video tomorrow, going over some things as well. And that's what we've got. So thank you all again for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. See you later.